All right, cool. I'm gonna get started then. This is probably the most straightforward class I've taught. I'm gonna try and just go in order. We're gonna start after we're through inspection and appraisal. So at this point, you're kind of getting ready, moving towards settlement. I'm gonna share on my screen some documents as we go through this, so you can follow along. I emailed them to you as well. James, I didn't email them to you, so I'll do that real quick. Let me send them to you if you feel like pulling them up on your screen as well. All right, cool. Share my screen. It's funny because settlement is, I always feel like it's the most nerve-wracking thing when you're a new agent, you know, that first settlement that you're going to. It is the most like boring, least, I don't want to say least important because it's the most important part of this whole thing. But when if you're sitting at the settlement table, everything is done. You're the least important person in the room. So your goal is to just get there with everything done. That's the goal. Get everything done prior so you're not showing up at the settlement table or the title company's office without stuff there, waiting for hours for your lender or whatever to get stuff sent over there. So you're not sitting there twiddling your thumbs, because that's when it becomes awkward and frustrating. All right, so who attends closing? Let's talk about the table. I drew this up today. I've actually wanted to do this for a while, because if there's anything that'll make you look like a new agent, it's walking into a settlement room, into a conference room, and not knowing where to sit. So I drew up this little diagram. It's in your email, or you have it as in paper here. The big thing to note is the buyer's side and the seller's side each sit on opposite sides of the table. You know, one side's for the seller side, one side's for the buyer side. The most important person in the room, if the lender isn't there, is the closer. That's their title, is the closer from the title company. And whether you close at our office, the title company's office, the listing agent's office, whatever, whether you represent the buyer or the seller, there will be a closer that the title company hired and is paying to come there and do your settlement for you. And that closer is going to sit at the head of the table. And if you don't know, well, which side of the table is the closer going to sit on, usually there'll be a computer or something. And if there is, that's where the closer is going to sit. And if there's not, then let them sit closest to the door, because they're going to be in and out making copies of stuff. We're the least important people in the room, so we are going to sit the farthest away from the closer. So the more important you are, the closer you're sitting to the closer. That's the best way to look at it. Sellers on one side of the table, buyers on the other side of the table. Now with COVID, sellers aren't attending a lot of closings. I love it that way. I'm actually coming here from a closing. Sellers weren't there, so we took over the whole table. The buyers had their family there and the kids running around. It makes it a lot easier. The buyer is the one who has all of the paperwork to sign, all of the mortgage documents, the big stack of papers, depending on the lender. So the closing is more for the buyer than it is for the seller. The seller only has a few things to sign. So this is the layout. This is how you should sit. You can look at this before you go into your closing. Ask me for this, you know, if you don't have it, just so you have an idea. So you're not walking in there blind. Because if you walk in there and you sit here, or you, the agent, sits right here, the closer is going to know immediately, or the other agent's going to know immediately, that this is probably your first settlement, right? So trying to avoid that if we can. Any questions on that? Dawn, I'm glad you're here, because you always ask good questions.
Well, ours is all screwed up with just separate little tables, like warring parties across the room and everything.
Yeah, COVID is doing that. So Dawn just had a closing at Whitegird and Cherry Hill, and I've actually never been. That was the first time I was ever actually in that office, oddly enough. And they had us sitting at two different folding tables because of COVID.
Like in a lobby.
In the lobby, yeah. So that was interesting. So not a big deal. But all right, what should you bring to closing? So you show up at settlement, you don't know what to do now. You ever see what is it, Talladega Nights, where Will Ferrell's like, I don't know what to do with my hands? That's kind of how you feel when you're in the settlement room, because you're not doing anything, especially if the lender is there. When you get to settlement, the closer will have the mortgage packet printed out and ready to go for your buyers to sign. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. So your job is really just to go there and make small talk with the other side if they're there, or just be there for support. I personally always bring my laptop. I open my laptop up and I type an email to the buyers or the sellers as we're sitting at the closing table. And I might be reminding the buyers about their utilities, about something the seller said at closing, like the garage door code. I might remind the buyers, I might get them a Home Depot gift card if I know they're going to go and do work at the property, like immediately after settlement. That might be my closing gift to them. Any little thing, or just a funny thing, or maybe I'll take a picture of them signing their paperwork and text it to them in case they want to, post that on social media later. So that's generally my role there. If the lender is not there, a lot of agents feel like they have to be the ones, especially agents who have been in the business for a long time. They'd want to get their hands on the papers and make it them, they want to be the one to control telling the buyers where they're signing and why. That's totally fine. But as a newer agent, don't feel like you need to be the expert with a large stack of mortgage paperwork that your buyer is signing. Focusing on buyer here because the seller's paperwork is minimal. So don't feel like the expert. The closer, the title person, that's what they're doing all day. They might do 8 to 10 closings a day. And all they're doing is walking buyers through signing those closing documents. So don't feel like you need to be the one that's sitting there analyzing every single piece of paper your buyer is signing. The title clerk will know what they're signing, will guide them through it, will tell them where to sign, will notarize the documents, all of that stuff. For the most part, you really are just kind of hanging out there unless there is a question or something like that. The only thing that you will have looked at, the only thing that you will have been sent prior to closing is that preliminary ALTA and the final ALTA. And we'll talk about them in a little bit, but that's the important document that shows all of the numbers and what the amount of the check is that your buyer needs to bring to closing or what your seller is going to receive from the settlement when it's all said and done. Questions? No? Cool. All right, so this is how you sit around the table. Who attends closing? Anybody can. Like today in this settlement that I had with Colin, there was, I don't know, the buyers had like 8 people. Sometimes people just bring their whole families. It's like a whole to-do. Sometimes it's just one person. It can be really anybody. The agents are supposed to be there. I like to say if your client's going, you should be there. If your client's not going, New Jersey's allowing DocuSigns now, and a lot of title companies are accepting that on the final documents. So there are cases where you have a seller who's got a North Jersey buyer and they close in North Jersey and you don't attend closing at all. I would say that's more on the rare side, so we won't get too much into that, but it's certainly possible.
Okay. Do you need me? It's a little funny.
Oh, you probably are nice and comfortable.
Yeah.
All right. And so where is the settlement? So buyer chooses in the state of New Jersey. Buyer chooses the title company, buyer chooses the lender. Obviously, buyer generally is the one that picks the time and place of settlement. And you always want to push to settle at the title company because when you're having a closing, the title company, the buyer's title company is really the one that is running the show. They're the ones with the documents. It's just easier. If you do the settlement here, that's perfectly fine. If you had a buyer and you wanted to do the settlement here, that's fine. YHT will send a closer to our office and they can use our printer and our copier here. But you might have to get up and give them your code to the printer or ask Skylar for a question or whatever. If you do it at the title company's office, that's all they're doing all day long. It's their home court. It usually goes faster and smoother when you're there. They know how to work their scanners and their printers. They have multiple conference rooms. I just feel it goes smoother when you do the settlements at the title company. And more and more, that's the way that it's going. There was one closing, out of, I don't know how many that was here at the office this year. So I prefer it that way. I think we all do. We're all starting to learn that. It's just easier to do these things at the title company's office. But again, buyer chooses. So if you have a North Jersey buyer who has a North Jersey attorney, which is common right now, you might end up having to drive an hour and a half to a settlement in North Jersey to have your seller sign 15 minutes worth of paperwork. So it is what it is. It's worth it to walk out of there with your check. So, all right, let's talk about you're done your inspection, you're done your appraisal. It's time to schedule settlement. Everybody gets these documents. This is a settlement notice. I actually picked one not from YHT on purpose, just because I feel like that everybody's used to YHT. I just want to show how similar they are from company to company. So this is a settlement notice from Foundation Title, local South Jersey title company. And this is what happens. The process is when you're through inspections and appraisal, maybe you're a week or two out for closing. At this point, it's time to schedule your closing. So what you're going to do is you're going to ask the buyer, if you have the buyer, what time do you want to close? We're going to close at the title company in Marlton. What time do you want to close? And they'll say 11 a.m. Then you would just email the title company, the listing agent, and the lender, and the attorneys if they're involved and say the buyer wants to close at 11 a.m. at the title company's office. Does that work for everybody? And if there's no objections, there usually are not, the title company will send out this official settlement notice. This actually matters if you have buyers or sellers that become uncooperative or want to breach settlement, because at this point you've got it in writing. Here's a notice to everybody. We're closing at 10 a.m. at the title company's office. So be there or be in breach of contract, basically. So this is what you get. I always will take this and send it to the buyers. And just let them know, just for your information, it tells you on here, you need to bring, here's the address for closing, the time, and it tells you on the, the back sheet, here's utility companies, make sure you do that, make sure you bring 2 forms of ID, all that fun stuff, something a little bit more professional to send to your buyer than just a calendar invite. Any questions on that stuff so far? And anybody on Zoom, just talk anytime. I have my volume on, so we'll hear you. All right, so you've sent your settlement notice out. Settlement is arranged for, a week from today. Today's Wednesday, so it's arranged for next Wednesday, the 27th, 12 p.m. So now what? Now is the time to start making sure, whether you represent the seller or the buyer, the biggest issue we're having right now with closings are on the lenders. And the lenders not having the documents ready for settlement. It is, I mean, there's been multiple closings where I show up and the title company is like, oh, we don't have the documents yet. And as a new agent, you don't know what that means. And that's okay. But what that means is the lender didn't prepare all the paperwork and email it to the title company and finalize the numbers for them to print it out and have everybody sign it at the settlement table, which means you're going to be sitting there waiting until that happens. And yes, the lender is absolutely in the wrong for that. And they should be letting you know, because they got this settlement notice too, by the way. So they know that everybody's going to be showing up there, 2, 4, 6, 8 people showing up at the settlement table, and there's no paperwork there. And they didn't let anybody know. So you need to be on top of it. Try and getting ahead of this before it happens and making sure you get a response to your email or your phone call that yes, the title company has received the documents from the lender prior to showing up at that settlement table. Because I promise the seller is not going to be happy when you're sitting there for 2 hours and they're waiting and they don't understand, why or what's going on. It's very important, because when we are doing our settlements, we're operating in the same time frame as the Fed, because when you have a settlement, the funds are wired from the bank for where the buyer is getting their mortgage to the title company. And the Fed cuts off wires, I think, at 4:30 p.m. So if your settlement extends past 4:30 p.m. and the wire hasn't been sent, no money can be distributed, no keys can be dispersed, and your settlement basically, even if you sign all the paperwork, won't occur until the title company receives that wire transfer of funds the next morning. So that's why it's so important to make sure, number one, the lender's paperwork has been received by the title company. You should be doing this, a few days before closing. And red flags are the thing right now. Not responding, saying we're going to get it, but haven't. Like, no, I want confirmation from the title company we've received all of the lender's closing documents. Very important. That's number one. Number two, the day before closing or the day of closing, you can start asking, has the wire been received? Every lender is different when it comes to the wire. When I say wire, I'm talking about the wire of the funds for the mortgage. So if the buyer is purchasing a house for $300,000 or taking out a $250,000 mortgage, the bank, the mortgage company, is going to wire $250,000 to the title company for the buyer's mortgage. And wires are generally fast, anywhere from instant to a couple hours, depending on what day of the month it is. There's only so much bandwidth that can sustain wire transfers. So if you happen to have a closing on the last day of the month, you might be sitting around waiting a little bit longer for a wire. So there's been closings where you go and everybody signs and you're like, okay, we're all done. And the title company says, nope, sorry, we're all done, but we haven't received the wire yet. So I can't give you your commission check. And I can't give the seller their check for the proceeds until the wire hits. That's a common issue, not as big of an issue as not having the paperwork at all, because at least we could sign, we know the money's coming, but we're just sitting around waiting for it. Most lenders, the lenders that we work with, will generally wire the money to the title company ahead of time. So if you have a closing next Wednesday, they might wire that money over on Tuesday. So when you show up on Wednesday, You sign your paperwork, you're out. Everybody gets the keys. But a lot of lenders, another reason why when the buyer's like, well, I don't, I want to use Quicken Loans or whatever, they're not going to wire that money until everybody signs all the documents, and then the title clerk scans the documents over to the lender. At that point, the lender will initiate the wire. And a lot of times that can result in delays. So it's another question. That's number 2 that you can ask ahead of time to stay ahead of the game. I think there was a third one, but I can't remember right now. Any questions on any of that stuff? No? Good. Just trying to avoid issues, We always try and do that. It doesn't matter. You're going to show up at a settlement and you're going to be waiting. It's going to happen in your career. Right now, lenders are just so busy. The title companies are so overwhelmed. You're going to be like Dawn and show up at your closing and they didn't ask if the seller was over 65, or what was the other thing that happened? They thought that Dawn was going to bring an original mortgage payoff, which is like completely ludicrous. Little minor things like that are going to happen. So that's just why it's important to try as best as you can, at least that way you can say, listen, I emailed you 2 days ago and said, do you need anything else from our side? Is there anything else needed from our side to close this deal? I always send that out, because then I can say, I asked you 3 times. I asked you last week, you didn't respond. So I asked you again, you responded and said, we're all good. And now we show up here and you needed an original mortgage payoff. Well, what do you want me to do? Drive to Wells Fargo in Texas and ask them for, like, it's just not going to happen right now. So thankfully in Dawn's case, it was already handled. It was just an oversight, but those things happen. It's inevitable. That's just the nature of this business. All right. All right, so let's talk about walkthroughs. So I wanted to show, I printed this page of the contract out because this talks about your walkthroughs. This is something that's often overlooked and would have benefited Colin today. It's funny that I was at his settlement today. It wasn't a mess, it was fine, and I don't know if he's on here or not. I didn't see him walk into the office yet, but in the state of New Jersey, if the standard contract of sale is what was signed, section 25 gives the buyer the right to 2 walkthroughs, to 2 pre-settlement inspections of the property. Very often we just do 1 final walkthrough. Nobody ever takes advantage of the second. Nobody ever takes advantage of that initial walkthrough. And we should. I do sometimes. So if the property was a rehab and there was no repairs needed, maybe you got a credit for repairs, you might not need that initial walkthrough because nothing needed to be done. But if you have a property where you have that red flag in the back of your mind because it was a mess, or it was a messy situation, or you asked for 7 repairs, use that initial walkthrough. You can go anytime reasonably close to settlement. So you could go a week or 2 prior just by yourself. Call the buyer and say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm going to go over to the property. I'm going to do an initial walkthrough for you and check the repairs to see that they were done. Why are we doing this? We're trying to avoid having an issue on that final walkthrough, because I think everybody, oops. Hold on, I had to replug back into the TVs here. See if that worked. I think everybody would agree that you'd rather show up at a property and 3 repairs have not been completed and the seller left a couch that your buyer doesn't want. I'm sure you'd all agree with me that we'd rather show up there by ourselves and have to deal with that than have our buyers and their whole family be there an hour before settlement. So if you have a feeling maybe the other agent never responds to your emails, or just was an issue, the whole deal, or you have any feeling, any inclination that your walkthrough is going to be an issue, there's no harm in doing a second walkthrough prior, even if it's just a few days before. What I usually do is, if there are repairs that are required or that the buyer asks for during their inspection process, follow up with the listing agent. Say, have those repairs been completed? And keep following up. Don't let them not respond to you. Don't let the listing agent just, bury their head in the sand. If you haven't heard back and you don't trust that those repairs were completed, you're allowed to go over there a couple days before settlement and make sure that they were done. Just to give your buyer a little bit of a heads up, because what happens is you show up there on the walkthrough day, on the day of settlement, an hour before closing, and the seller left a bunch of crap and left it dirty and didn't fix something, and now your buyer's got nowhere to live. So they're panicked and they're in a losing position when it was the seller's fault that they didn't honor the contract. The contract says, section 23, the property is to be left in broom clean condition and free of all debris. That is what the contract says. So if it is not left in that condition, the buyer has a right to three things. We'll jump into this now. So if you do show up on final walkthrough and something happens, it does. It just happens. There's been more times, for whatever reason, plumbing is alive and it has a conscience, and plumbing loves to stop working and leak the day of your closing. It works fine for 30 years, and then the day of your settlement, it stops working and starts leaking. So if you show up to your final walkthrough, you flush the toilet and it cracks in half, what do you do? Oh my God, what do you do? It's an immediate panic. First off, if you're in coaching, call me right away. That's totally fine. But I'll tell you what your options are. And I like to just calm the buyer down. Like, listen, we're adults. This is a crappy situation, maybe literally, maybe figuratively. Here are our options. These are our only options here. You can continue to close and forget about it. That's option one. Deal with it and close. If they left a bunch of stuff in there and your buyer has nowhere to go, you can just deal with it and go and close at settlement. Number two, you can have the title company escrow money. What does that mean? Show up there and 2 repairs that you were expected to be completed were not completed. You could call the listing agent and say the buyer's not willing to close because these issues were supposed to be completed and they weren't. We want the seller to escrow $2,000, $5,000, whatever. And what's going to happen is the title company on the side will prepare a document that the buyer and the seller will sign, and they will withhold whatever you agree in escrow until the buyer and the seller sign off that they can release those funds. Third option is have the seller bring certified check, cashier's check, for whatever dollar amount is appropriate. Have them bring that money to closing and give it to your buyer for the inconvenience, for forgetting to get rid of the couch, for whatever it is. If $1,000 so that they can buy a dumpster and have their cousin come over and get rid of all the stuff in there. Those are your 3 big options in order to not have to delay closing. Because of course, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, if you're not okay with any of those 3 options and you do not want to close today because of this issue, that's okay. I support you in that, and we can delay closing because the seller has not honored their obligations of the contract. So obviously we don't want to do that. Everything's done. The paperwork's there, the money, everything is done. For us to have to delay closing because of a minor issue sucks. Nobody wants to do that. So if you can do one of those 3 other options, do it, especially if the buyer needs to move and they don't have a choice. So escrowing is the worst option of those 3. Your best 2 options are deal with it or have the seller bring a check to closing. The reason escrow sucks is, and let me tell you this, if you have a seller, I had an issue where the sewer line was cracked. Forget how the buyers discovered that. I think they went and the toilet wasn't flushing. Had a plumber come out like immediately, do a scope, the sewer line cracked. What they think happened was, now I'm remembering, they ran all the stuff during inspection, and old sewer lines, when you're in a foreclosed house that don't have water running through them all of the time, they dry up and they get brittle, and then you run water through them and then they crack. I don't know. It's just something that happens, whatever. That's what happened in our situation. So we had the seller, the buyer said, we'll close, but we want you to hold double the amount of the repair in escrow until it's fixed. So it was $10,000 that the seller had to put into escrow. And they did. So we settle up, they put the money in escrow, the seller has their plumber go out and fix the sewer issue. No problem, right? All good. Here's the receipt. Sewer's working fine. Seller signs off on the release so that they can get their $10,000 back and says, here you go, Mr. Buyer, please sign off on this release because I fixed the sewer line like I promised. And the buyer says, I'm not willing to sign that because I didn't notice there's a stain on the wall here and I want you to paint it before I sign off on this. And so the seller says, well, that sucks, but I want my money back. And the amount of time it's going to cost for me to hire an attorney to sue you to get it back, it'd be easier for me to just have my painter go out and paint that. Gets painted, great. Guess what? Now the door is stuck. Now there's this little issue. Now this isn't working. And the buyer's refusing to sign the escrow release to give the money back to the seller. That's why that's a crappy option. It's okay if you have the buyer, but it's worse if you have the seller. That makes sense?
You can't just like make a document that says like this money has this.
Nope.
No.
You can. That's what the document says. So that you know, what Valerie asked is, can't you just have a document signed that says, you know, one sentence, fix a sewer line, provide a receipt, and then the money's automatically released to the seller, right? Like that would be great. In the state of New Jersey, that's not how it works. Buyer and seller both must sign an escrow release for that money to be released from escrow. An escrowee is not allowed to release those funds unless the buyer and the seller sign the release. And for this reason, Keller Williams, Cherry Hill, George Denny talks about this sometimes. We have lots of money in escrow, $1,000, a bunch of little $1,000 that are in escrow because one party won't sign a release. So we are just obligated to hold this money in escrow indefinitely until a court orders it to be released. So that's why we hate taking $1,000 escrow, because it can be there, you know, it can just sit in an escrow account forever. Nobody's going to go to court. Very few people are going to go to court over $1,000. And that's why a title company sometimes doesn't want to hold escrow, because they don't want to deal with that. Buyer and seller both always must sign off on an escrow release for that money to be left out of the account. All right, so you go to your final walkthrough and you want to know what to look for. I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this, only because this is not a mandatory document here. This is the final walkthrough checklist. I always use this just so that I can remember, because I'll forget, all the things that I should be checking at final walkthrough. Pretty straightforward here. Go through each one of these items when you go to your settlement, or when you go to your final walkthrough. Check it off on the right side and have your buyer sign it, and you can sign it. And there is a spot for it in command for you to upload it if you want to. So not required, but you know, it is helpful. Remember, you can't you know, run the AC if it's below 65 degrees out. So we're getting to that time of year. So I would always write like too cold over here if we couldn't run the AC. And sometimes your clients will ask, and I've had clients ask me, you know, hey, we couldn't test the AC during our inspection because it was December, and we couldn't test it during our final walkthrough because it was January. So what are we supposed to do if we fire it up in May and it doesn't work? Is the seller going to be on the hook for it? No, the buyer will be on the hook for it. That's welcome to home ownership. So my recommendation would be to get in that scenario, if you have a nervous buyer, maybe you have an older air conditioning system, have them buy a home warranty or ask the seller for home warranty during their repair request, because you're not going to get a seller to buy them a new air compressor in May. You're just not going to prove that the seller knew it wasn't working. So CYA, right? Check the outlets. You know, I always turn the oven on in the dishwasher and I put my car keys by the oven, little pro tip, because took me a couple times of leaving the final walkthrough and being like, oh my God, did I turn the oven off? Turning around and going back to make sure that I did. So leave your keys there, because you can't leave the house without your keys. So dishwasher, you know, it says on here to run it through a full cycle. I've never done that and I never will. Turn it on, make sure it works, make sure it drains. You know, that stuff was checked during their home inspection. So really this should be, it's just now that there's, you know, home inspections aren't happening on every deal. So I would take it more seriously, and I would definitely do your initial walkthrough if your buyers waived their home inspection. Do your initial walkthrough and run this stuff through their whole cycle, just to make sure that it works. But if they had a home inspection 2 weeks prior to your settlement, you can assume that it's going to hopefully still be working. I'll tell you though, my experience, biggest issues are plumbing and rehabs. Rehabs are the worst. If somebody lived in a house, they probably took a shower. They could have taken a shower and used all of the bathrooms the morning of your settlement. A rehabbed house, nobody's ever used this stuff. They put all new plumbing in, new fixtures. So you don't know until you have like all 3 bathrooms running at once, 2 showers going, the sink and the dishwasher running. You don't know if there's going to be leaks or anything major that's going to happen or not work. So in my experience, the most common issues are in rehab homes. You can have the most seamless home inspection, but at the end of the day, that inspector is only turning things on and off. He's not running the bathtub for an hour. He might fill it up and drain it, but until somebody's living there, you're not gonna know. So just be careful with that. And it's another reason to advise your buyers when they're buying a rehab home to get a home warranty. With that being said, more and more sellers who are rehabbing homes are offering warranties by default so that their insurance and E&O will cover them after settlement because of these issues. All right. And one other thing to note is if you have a seller, so I have a seller checklist we'll look at, but I'll just pull it up now. Your seller should not turn utilities off. All right, the utilities are supposed to be on for the buyer's walkthrough, final walkthrough. The buyer is the one that should be changing utilities. Don't have the seller call, because what you'll find is some genius at PSE&G will show up, see the for sale sign, see the moving truck, and be like, huh, yeah, I'm gonna turn the power off. Without being like, let me check, let's double check that first. So prevent that from happening and just have the buyer transfer utilities, and they won't turn it off at all. If the seller will always make the mistake of turning the power off. So just try and avoid that for yourself. So this is I sent this to everybody. Actually, this is courtesy of Melissa Morfin, a seller's checklist. This has everything from under contract to close. A couple things I wanted to talk about on here are, we're going to jump into just the seller side. So the seller side, agents go under contract and you're like, now what? Because you don't need to schedule inspection. You don't really know what to do. There's no lender, the seller is moving. There's not as much to do on the seller side. So when you go under contract for the seller, you need to make sure they get the CO, and that's on this checklist, unless it was being sold as is or explicitly agreed it's the buyer's responsibility, CO and or fire cert or whatever. And the deed and affidavit and the survey, and you might look at this and be like, oh my God, how do I get all of this stuff? You get it by sending an email to YHT or by going into DocuSign forms and pulling up the seller side title order. And then YHT will handle what's called seller side conveyancing for your sellers. They will help them pull the mortgage payoff. They will prepare the deed for closing. They will be there when somebody has a huge lien that pops up on title. They will be there to help walk you through what you can do, what your options are. What I had been teaching in the past, because I had done it a lot, is just have the buyer's title company handle the seller side documents. And the reason for that is because it's all under one roof then. The title company doesn't need to do a lot for the seller. They just need to help you basically and prepare the deed. But what I found is when you have an unexpected lien pop up or some judgment or something like that pop up, you really want it to be your title company in your corner for that. So having your title company that the rep that you can call and at 8 o'clock at night and be like, the seller's panicking, there's a $25,000 judgment, there's a $250,000 mortgage, if Betty is still on this call. You want to be able to have somebody that's in your corner for the seller side processing. And that document's in DocuSign. We can jump in there real quick and look at it. Oh, I see stuff in the chat. Two things I want to show in DocuSign, one of them being an Alta and one of them being the processing doc for seller side title. And I know this is supposed to be a closing, but a lot of us forget to do anything for the seller side until closing's a week out. And the buyer's title company is like, hey, do you have the deed? And you're like, oh, am I supposed to do the deed? I don't know. So you're supposed, so you need to make sure that you do it earlier on in the transaction. So let me pull up somebody's listing. Might even be in here, YHT. So add from DocuSign forms, of course, and this is under YHT folder, YHT seller documents, and it's the order form. Add selected, just the order form. If you fill this out and send it over to orders@yhttitle.com, they will take care of pretty much everything for you for the seller side. And your role is to just make sure everything is taken care of appropriately, help when it's needed, make sure that these things that are on here have taken place. If there's mortgages, that they order the payoffs, all that kind of stuff. So you fill this form out for the seller, you put all of their info, you need to put the social on because the title company is going to run title on your seller to see if there's any outstanding judgments or liens against your seller. And you're going to get that title report back. But there was just a title class. I think Jolyn just taught one yesterday or the day before. So I don't want to get too much into the title stuff in this class, but this is what you need to fill out to have your seller side processing handled by YHT. Every title company's got a form similar to this. So they will help with most of that stuff. All right. What else? Compliance docs. All right, I printed this. I made this. This is just a replica of what's in command. So I sent this to you. So maybe this is a little bit more information than what's in command, but these are your required documents and when you get them for your settlement. So what I see happen a lot is agents get the preliminary ALTA from the title company, which doesn't have any signatures on it, and they upload that in command. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the fully signed documents from your closing. And these first three documents here, the signed ALTA, the signed deed, and marked up title, 90% of title companies in New Jersey will hand you a packet after your settlement with your commission check, and all three of those documents will be in it. And you will walk out of the settlement room with those documents. If they don't, it's no big deal. You just need copies. Obviously, you're not getting originals of anything other than your commission check, KW's commission check. So you can just email the title company and have them send you these documents if you forget. Not every title company gives up marked up title, so you might have to email them for that, especially if they're not from around here. If you ever have an issue getting marked up title, sidebar, just write it in your comments in command and submit anyway. They will push it through. Some North Jersey and out-of-state title companies don't send that to you. Just saying no.
So you're saying just put the unmarked up one through and put a comment that you didn't get it?
Fine. Yeah, or nothing, because you should have uploaded. You're talking, the unmarked up title is just the title commitment, and you would have uploaded that in under contract.
I see. Okay.
So when you submit closed, you might just not have that one required document. And on the right-hand side in command, there's the three dots you can click on and hit add comment, and you can just type in there, that the title company didn't give me the marked up title. The only document you'll get prior to settlement is a CO or fire cert. A lot of agents will bring this document to settlement rather than just sending you a copy. And I've learned the reason for that is because most townships don't email this. They issue a physical copy, and 50% of agents don't know how to scan. So they'll just bring it to settlement and let the title company scan it for you. It's the only document that you could upload to the closed tab in command prior to settlement is the CO or fire cert. And let me tell you, right now we're having issues with the CO and fire cert with these as-is deals, people not getting them, not scheduling them, whatever, giving, putting stuff on the buyer they're not supposed to. You need the CO or the fire cert. And some title companies are now requiring that you get the CO or the fire cert from the township as well. So, and again, yeah, go ahead.
So right now I am currently dealing with an investment, under contract with an investment property, and the seller is having the buyer obtain the CO and fire certification. So when I called the township, they're requiring me to also complete a zoning application too. So that's really new.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that what township? So every township is different. If they're requiring you to complete a zoning application, I don't know. I would ask, is that something they've always done? Is that new? What red flag caused them to make you fill that out? What's going on?
It's required.
Is there an issue with it?
No, there isn't. It was just, I don't know, it was just a little different. I have it printed out right now and I'm completing it. Everything's fine. It's just, I don't know. This is like the first transaction I had to deal with, with the zoning application I have to complete.
Yeah, that's weird. If you send me a copy of that, I'd appreciate it. But every township is different. That's the frustrating thing about COs.
Yeah, exactly.
So for example, Willingboro does not do this anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows, but they used to require a survey on every sale. And let me tell you what a pain that is, because it's a lot of rehabs in Willingboro. So you have somebody buying a property at a foreclosure. So the buyer's responsible for the CO and they're paying $500 for a survey. Then 3 months later, they go to sell it. And now it's not being sold as is. So now the seller who just bought a survey 3 months ago needs to buy another survey to be able to sell their property. Or you have somebody who's like underwater on their home and now they're getting hit with what? I have to pay $500 to get a survey to get the CO. It's crazy to me. Free and fair market, and we have appraisals and townships that love to stick their hands in and say, no. You need to do this or you need to do that, and until we let you close. So every township's different. Some townships, the CO inspections there was just a class on this, so we don't have to get into it. I think Brian Eckelberg did it or is doing it tomorrow, maybe. Take it on a case-by-case scenario. Call the township, figure it out, get the CO. It's just a, a headache, but it's a good learning experience, so. All right. I think that, all right, so settlement. So the last thing that I want to talk about, everything went well. You had your closing, thank God. Everybody signed, everybody's happy. Your closing gift. There's a lot of people ask me, what do I get for a closing gift? So I figured I'd talk about that for a second. It's important, right? Because that's a big thing for us, is building that relationship, keeping that relationship after settlement. Do whatever works for you. I can give you a couple ideas. I stopped bringing the gifts to the settlement table. I felt like there was enough going on that day. I would go to their house a couple of weeks or a month later, right? Because a lot of these people weren't my friends or anything. So it gives me an opportunity to go and see their house after they moved in, drop a little gift off for them, and an opportunity to make that connection after they walk out of the settlement table. And I used to do, my wife helped me with it, but I always loved doing baskets. And do a little basket, and if they drink, put alcohol, local restaurant gift card. I don't do the custom things, like a custom, something that they hang up or that's like a permanent fixture, because I feel it's like awkward, because I know I'm going to go over there and I don't want them to feel like they have to keep my gift, because everybody's going to get them something. I'm their realtor. I don't know, to get them a sign that says "Believe" to hang up on their wall. I don't know if that's what they're, what they're into or whatever. So, and it's just not me. And I love getting people something that they're actually going to use. So, one of my friends, single guy, works a lot. So I got him a DoorDash gift card and, dropped that off at his house with a 4 logo. So, I just kind of try and tailor it to them. And if you can, align yourself with a local small business and come up with something with them, somebody that owns a business or does something like that, team up with them, give gift cards to that restaurant or whatever. And Home Depot is a big one too. I know I said that at the beginning of this call. Home Depot or Lowe's, whatever they prefer, just because if you're going to go and buy paint, I know you're going to spend, that money. It goes a long way for them, because I know that if you're going to tear the walls out in your house and I give you a nice plant, are you going to do the demo around the plant? Because I want you to take care of the plant if I bought it for you. So I think it's better to just get, something that they're going to use. So if anybody has any cool ideas, I'm always, ears open for that.
The sister gets your clients like some Cutco knives.
The Cutco knives, yeah. A lot of people do that and they'll brand them to you. Yeah.
Well, they're expensive. When I moved to Maine, like if we have people that moving from other areas to our area, when I moved to Maine, they gave me this really cool, it wasn't that expensive, a very nice Maine food cookbook. And I used it for 12 years I was there. It was kind of cool.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
We have Philly local food, or, if they're coming from far away or different, something like that, everybody could use a cookbook.
I like that a lot. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And what was the other thing? Oh, pictures. Settlement's a great opportunity to take a picture with your clients. So when you leave the house, put it on your checklist. When you leave the house, everybody ask them, do you want a picture out front of the house? They'll almost always say, I don't need to share anymore. They'll almost always say, yes, and get in it. Let's take a selfie together or whatever. So it's a great opportunity for you to post. We all see those posts every day. But remember, because I know for a fact, everybody on here is friends with 1,000 realtors. Our friends that we care about are not. So they're not seeing those every day. So it'll mean a lot more when you post it. You're reaching out to your network that is not friends with 100 realtors, just you. So keeping top of mind. Simit, as an example, always did the socks. If you followed Simit for more than a year, before COVID, every closing he went to, he wore like some crazy socks, and he posted on his Facebook, and it always got a ton of traction. He did not say, I'm in a closing. He did not say, call me for real estate. You knew. He's at a conference table. He's got his, crossed leg and takes a picture of his Monopoly money socks or whatever it is. And he always got a good, a hit for it. So doing that kind of stuff is important. Obviously, in settlement's a great opportunity to do it, because there's no, you're working there for sure.
Cool.
Other than that, you can do the key, the classic key. I know Daphne, if she's still on here, I think she got off. allthingsrealestate.com. I put it in my notes to try and remember to talk about all things real estate. You can buy, and I hate to see a newer agent waste money on gimmicky stuff, But if you've had a couple closings and you wanted to get something for a good picture for your clients to, brand awareness, this is a fantastic site to get like a custom branded key or shirt or something to leave at you could get 10 of these and leave them at your client's house or something like that. This is a great site just to get stuff for your open houses, for your listings, whatever, but it's also got a lot of good stuff for closing gifts and social media ideas, like a big key.
I was thinking at the closing, because I had to give the keys over, and I was like, oh, that would be like, I had the seller, so it didn't matter, but if I had a buyer, it would be perfect to just buy some little Keller Williams keychains or something. 'cause you have to give them the keys
That's actually
anyway.
funny you say that, because if Colin was on here, I'd give him a hard time for it. The keys that his buyers got today were in a plastic sandwich bag.
I know,
and
that's what I mean. I
so
didn't
it's
have
cool.
anything.
You
I
can
just
buy
gave them
those
loose keys.
keychains. You can
What?
buy branded. You can buy branded. I used to do when I was on the team. I love them, but they were like $10 a piece. They were not cheap. So,
Yeah.
and that's if you buy like 100 of them. And I hope that everybody in here has 100 closings, but if you haven't had one or you've had two, it's a big expense. So, but yeah, you can buy KW ones or go to the Nexus Association of Realtors. I believe that they have some that you can buy there that are just not branded, the little keychain to put the keys on when you give it to your buyer.
And I think that Red Store on Facebook, that Keller Williams Red Store, they might have just keychains that.
Yep, they have them there as
or
well.
something.
Yeah. And with that being said too, this reminds me, another thing that you can do is after you do your final walkthrough, I just did this for a client because this was a rehab house. They weren't doing any work for it. My wife was friends with one of the buyers. So she got their gift and we left final walkthrough. And then I said, I'll meet you at the title company. And then I went back in and set the gift, like I set it up in their house because I knew we were going to go to settlement and they were going to go right back. So when they went back, and they did, they took a picture of it and posted it on social media and tagged me in it. Like, thank you to Jim and for this gift. So just another idea. Cause I don't like walking into, you never know, especially if you haven't been to the closing office before, you never know what you're going to get into.
Yeah.
So to walk in with like all this stuff, wait and be like, here you go.
Yeah, I felt weird because like the other people were still doing, all the buyers were doing their little signing over there because they let us go early. Like the buyers weren't done. They're like, oh, you guys can go. And I brought my gifts in to give her and I was kind of like, felt like a Santa Claus and these people are sitting over here signing and I'm walking by like, oh, here's your stuff. Yeah. Kind of weird. It's awkward.
That's actually one thing that I forgot to talk about that's on the command sheet that I gave out, the compliance stuff. If you close with YHT, you can leave settlement and go home, go to the beach. You don't need to come here with your check. They can wire, just ask them. They will wire the money over here for no cost. So they'll send it right over into our bank account and then you can upload the documents in command and hit submit, have them email it all to you.
Can I ask one quick question? So once we put everything in on the day of closing and all that, like, do they just put the check in our mailbox? Does somebody email us to say our check is ready, or how do we know?
That's a good question. Yeah, so they process them as soon as they can. But if you bring the check here and you deposit it in that in the box in the command room, in the downstairs printer room, if you drop the check in there, if you do it early enough in the day, they could have a check in your mailbox that night.
So you have to go back to your mailbox.
If you want a direct deposit form, just let me know.
Yeah, but that's fine. I mean, but
they can also set up direct deposit and then they can just deposit it right into your bank account. Either way, it's fine.
Can you refresh my memory as what the code is for the office so I can come in at night and get my check or in the weekend?
It's 11111. I'm just kidding. It's 0513. Our address.
Yeah. All right. That's fine.
Yeah, and I'll check if we had a closing together. I'll check like after this dawn. I'll walk in there and see if your check is in there. But that's really all I have. If anybody has any questions, anybody? No, good.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank
Anytime.
you.
Yep. Go sell some houses. Talk to you guys.
Thanks, Jim.
See ya.